Hello, welcome back to another pen talk. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for joining me on my journey as I explore interesting pens from China, mostly bought on eBay. But those that watch my channel know I sometimes take a side road or take a back road or get off the highway and explore some unknown territory. But today we're back on the main road. And I just find my human pen stand to be an amazing pen display. And putting on a rotating turntable just adds another dimension to it. There's no chatoyancy, there's no amazing acrylic. It's just a plain bluish gray pen. But sometimes this kind of classic look has appeal. So this is a pen sold by Bobby, only on Etsy as far as I can tell. Here's the sale on Etsy. It's, I'd say, a little bit on the high side for what the pen is, but let's explore it a little bit and see what we think about it. We're going to let the human pen stand come around, wink at you, and let's dig into the details. So this pen feels light in the hand. I would say bordering on too light. The matte kind of aluminum finish on that clip is quite nice. I like it. I think it goes well with this color. The printed branding on the bottom of the cap is also nice. And you have a band here that matches the clip. It's a pull-off cap, and it pulls off relatively easy. And we see that hooded nib. You know, your classic clutch ring, as they refer to it in many forms, and that's what Parker referred to it as. You know, just a standard hooded nib. I have to check the auction, but I would say that looks like an extra fine to me. Standard feed, when you take all these things apart, they both are, there seems to be a similar thing with fins in the feed, the collector. The barrel just unscrews, and it's very nice. Those threads are done well. And we see that same type of material as the clip, that kind of matte finish, that kind of aluminum matte finish. So I think that's nice. Some of the 51As, especially the special Bobby edition, it has the calligraphy nib that he's worked on. You know, standard piston converter, it fits very securely and very snugly, which I like. That's always a good sign. And that little insert there, you can see that opening is kind of like what you get with a platinum pen or a sailor pen. It's a very large opening. So that's going to limit the cartridges that'll fit into here, if that's what your desire is. A lot of people seem to ask about them, but I don't work on cartridges, so I have to admit, not on my radar. So that's good. Let's take a look inside that cap and see if we can find anything as a cap liner. So when we look inside, we'll see that clutch ring, that spring that matches up with that ring between the section and the barrel. If we look further down the cap, we'll see, a screw that holds in the clip. So the clip is slid into a slot in the top of the cap, and then that screw is put in to hold everything in place. Time will only tell if that screw is resistant to ink, because we've seen some other Chinese pens where that screw will corrode over time. So the Natami model screams out for a comparison. And before I bought it, I thought about the Keiko Retro, which is the orange pen here. And then obviously you also think about the Jinhao 51A, in this really nice acrylic barrel. And one would be remiss to not include the original that started the whole hooded nib pen approach, is the Parker 51. This is one of the earlier ones with a vacuumatic filling system. So we have metal caps here. These pens are all plastic, both cap and barrel, which is something the Parker 51 never did. And I don't think the 51A does either. And then there's the Wingsung 6001 and its many variances, which also have metal caps, but many different varieties of barrels, especially some transparent ones, which I find very interesting. So let's uncap these and take a look at the business end. So here we all posted, and they all post fairly deeply and fairly securely. So if you push the cap on with enough force, it'll stay on, not fall off. The sections are very similar in their design, but it's kind of like if you have a hooded nib, there's not too much you can really do with a section and still accommodate the hooded nib. The Parker 51 has the smallest amount of nib exposed here, and the Keiko Retro is very close but still a little bit more nib, and the 51A has about twice as much, or maybe even 3 times as much nib exposed, and so does the Natami. I like the fact that these are all 3 very unique and different clips. You know, you got 2 ball ends. This one is kind of a modernistic design with that little cutout in it, and you got the very recognizable classic Parker arrow clip, which was brought over to the 51 from the Vacuumatic, where I first saw this Art Deco design with a lot of detail in it. They all have some type of clutch ring between the section and the barrel, and within the cap there's generally something that uses this clutch ring to secure the cap when the pen is capped, and also to prevent the nibs from drying out. And one of the advantages of a hooded nib is you have less exposure of ink to air, so therefore the nib stays wetter, doesn't dry out as much as it could be if it was a much larger nib. But what the downsides to that is the variations in writing are not going to be there like you can get with a more standard size nib. There are some Grail pens of Parker 51s with broads and obliques and things of that nature, but I've never seen one, never written with one, so I can only talk about the mystical nature of them. And of course the Chinese variants of this hooded nib design are pretty much extra fine and fines. They have varying writing characteristics. Some, or most I think, are on the dry side, even dry side for these type of nibs. To me, the 618 from Wingsung, which is a piston filler, has the best, wettest, smoothest nib of the lot of ones that I've experimented with. But when we put the Natami nib to paper, maybe I might find another. Here's just a little close-up of those sections. So the Jinhao 51 certainly mimics the Parker 51 more than the other pens. The Keiko Retro has kind of a clear element here that you can see ink levels. It's not really as emphatic as I think. These 3 pens, the Chinese versions, are cartridge converter pens, whereas the original Parker 51s were Vacuumatics, and then they went over to the aerometric filler, which has only a few lovers of that filling system. And then later on they went into converters and cartridges, and they went into the 45 and the 21. So the pen evolved with Parker, but it certainly was an iconic pen at the time in the early 40s when it was first introduced, and stayed popular for many years. So what ink to put in it? I chose this ink because I got a bunch of diamine ink from the pen thing, and sapphire blue is definitely one of those blue colors that everyone should have, and let's see how this one looks. Like all the pens of this design, at least all the ones that I'm familiar with, it fits fine in the hand unposted. But if you decide to post it, it posts very deeply, and you got to put a little effort into it, but very securely. And I think it adds that necessary weight to the pen, because the pen is basically very light. We'll give you those weights. And for the sake of comparison, we'll give you the dimensions of this section from where that cutout is up to the clutch ring, and then the length. Now let's write. So I had the microphone next to the nib, so you got to hear that nib on the paper. And each nib will make its own specific sounds, especially on this Fabriano paper, which has some texture to it. It's not super smooth, which I enjoy because I enjoy a little bit of feedback. I like feeling the tires on the road. So I'm very impressed from the minute that I wrote with this pen right after I inked it up. The converter worked great, got a full fill, and I did my 3 fill, empty, fill, empty, fill. And the last fill you do very slowly, so you get a really complete full fill of that converter. But this just glides across the paper. So I mentioned some of the advantages of hooded nibs are, you know, they don't dry out. And the other thing is they're consistent writers, at least the good ones. So each time you uncap it and put nib to paper, you're going to get a consistent writing experience, which some people like and some people may not enjoy. They may enjoy nibs with more character to them, nibs that are a little soft and flex. But, you know, for taking notes for an everyday carry for a school pen, I would say this is perfect. You know, with that, it's a fine nib. I checked the auction by Bobby on Etsy. So I like this pen. So let's do a rating. And I'm going to give it an 8.8. There is no skipping. It's just that, you know, I'm writing over the camera and the tripod, and sometimes I don't keep pressure on. So let's look at what that rating is composed of. So normally I write out this pen ranking real time, but I had camera challenges, so we needed to do it after I wrote it out. So the design is 2 checks, nothing to hit it out of the ballpark. I almost just gave it 1 check on design, but I like the clip, so that went from 1 to 2. Engineering is 2. I mean, the parts all fit together. They're well designed. They work well. The build is 2 checks. It's made well. The threads work together well. Writing, I gave it 3 checks because this is a great hooded nib. It ranks up there with the best of them, but I've also had good hooded nibs on my 618s and my Wingsung 51. So it is good, but not exceptional, but it's worth 3 checks. The look is 2 checks. I mean, it does look nice. This is a kind of a muted pastel color, but it works well. It works well with that matte aluminum color on the clip and the clutch ring. And for value, I gave it 2 checks, and it's also something that I almost just gave it 1. You know, it's $11 and change, and, you know, that puts it up into the 618 category, you know, close to a 601, which are piston fill or pump or vacuum fill. So, you know, this is a classic pen. And, you know, I think it'll last a long time, and that, I think, raises the value. The fact that Natami, this is kind of a unique look, also raises the value a little bit. So we've reached the end of the video, and again, when I was recording this live, the camera wasn't doing the recording. So thank you for watching. I may have many great writing experiences, enjoy putting ink on paper, find an instrument that you enjoy doing that with, and go to town. So we've reached the end of this video. There'll be more to come. I'm pretty certain about that. And, you know, if this is a pen that you like, who knows how long it's going to last. The Natami Inception, which was the Natami that became available, is still readily available, and the price has gotten quite reasonable. Here's one place you can get it. And that, I would say, is probably a better value than this pen because it's a little bit bigger. It feels more substantial in the hand. And with the different colors and the way it has some unique design characteristics to it, I think it has a better value and look to it in the long term. And the nib is a standard nib, and it writes very well. So we're going to say bye for now. This is the end of the video. Until we meet again, enjoy your pens. Enjoy writing with them. I certainly enjoy this pen and ink combo.